you know, doing his elementary school and middle school, went into high school. So high school says, well, I don't want to go to any high school. I want to go to the best high school. So mom and dad picked the best high school for them, and that was a Troy. The Troy High School was supposed to be really good. Anybody want to say something about that? Did you have a lot of fun there?
After a fashion, yeah.
So initial time, getting adjusted to new school and everything, it was kind of hard. But after that, once they got used to it, this was really something. So the school had the best teachers, he made the best friends there, and guess what? He's still in connection with all those friends now. So I would say that's a really good school. The school also prepared him for what was coming next. He got some really good scores, and then he went to UC Irvine. At UC Irvine, he said, well, I'm going to try to figure out what my major is going to be. Goes into bioengineering and biomedical stuff. First year he does that, and he says, really, I think that's not what I want to do. In the first year itself, he was taking Latin. When he took Latin, he says, oh wow, this is amazing. What I can do is I can read this stuff, I can figure out what exactly was supposed to happen in the history, right? And then he says, okay, and then there's this Greek stuff that's going on. I can learn about Greek gods, all the history in it, and then connect all of that with philosophy, and then let's see what comes up. He really got interested in that, and guess what? He changed his major to Latin. Now, how many people do that now? Very few people. Well, he went on to major in Latin, and second year, third year, fourth year, all his years in college, he got straight A's in Latin. Now, I haven't seen anybody do that, but this guy does that.
Yeah.
Really, amazing. Final year, he says, well, I'm a senior, I gotta do a thesis. What am I gonna do for thesis? So in Latin, you gotta write a thesis. You write a 40-page long thesis. And some people write thesis really nice and crazy. What this guy came up with says, goes and talks to his instructor and says, professor, I want to write a thesis. That's not a real regular thesis, but I want to write a poem. This poem, not too many people do that. You need to learn language like you read it and you are writing it. Most people, they learn language when they take a major in languages. They learn in terms of interpretation. So I put a book in your hand and you interpret it and you say, okay, well, this means that. If you want to really write it, you really need to understand what it does. So he goes out and says, I'm going to write a thesis that's a poem. It was a 30-line poem. One line took him about 7 to 8 hours to write it because he has to do the research, figure out what's the right way to do it, figure out the right words, make it more elegant, must be poetic. And finally he does that and takes it back to the professor and says, here's my thesis, a 30-line long poem. Guess what? The professor could not find anything wrong with it. They said, this was awesome, this is crazy. And there are very few people in this world right now who can write a poem in Latin. His library is full of books, and that books contains one section that says, here's Latin books, here's another section with Greek books, and there are all these interpretations of those books that you can see in English. Then he picks up a couple of books and says, okay, let me find out what does this book mean. And then he reads it himself, checks out the interpretations, and says, well, I like it in this fashion, like I like this thing in this fashion. But he really knows the language, so nobody needs to say what it really means. He already knows it. So that's awesome. I would say that was really good. Was done with Latin, and then he says, well, I'm going to check out what I'm going to do major in after this. He says, I'm not done with Latin. I want to do something next. So he goes out and says, I'm going to study medicine, I'm going to check out law. So he checks out both of them and says, guess what, I like law. So he goes to law, and he goes to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He says, the reason why I'm going there is because there I can go in and check out the Congress, I can go in and check out what the president's doing, I can go in and check out what the Supreme Court is doing, and the judges of the Supreme Court are coming down there and they're teaching them. So he says, that's real stuff. I want to go there and learn that. So he goes out and learns that, and then he goes out and does a couple of summer interns, a couple of summer programs. One was at Oxford University. At Oxford University, he goes and does international law, and he figures out, oh, this is really, really good, because now I know what politics does, I know what history is, and I can tie it all up with international law. He did that, and then he comes back and says, you know, I know all these things. How do I put it into practice? So next year, he goes out and says, I'm going to go and get an internship at the Pentagon. So he goes and does that at Pentagon. Needless to say, in 2 months, he was so good that his boss, who would say, well, we need to write down this letter so that this letter becomes like a memorandum that needs to be written down and distributed amongst all of the other executives. Well, guess what? These guys write it, and he wasn't alone. There were a group of other kids as well, bright and smart. They wrote the memorandum. The boss looks at it, and it goes further, and it goes out to all the generals and corporals and everybody else. So you can imagine how important that stuff was. Well, at the end of the story, what happened was the boss said, if Jay has looked at this thing and he says that there is a problem in here, then there's a problem in here. So that's how good the repo was. At the end of the whole program, he got awarded one of the highest awards, and that was awarded by the Secretary of Defense as one of the coins, the collection coins that he got from the Secretary of Defense. So I would say that was an awesome work. So on behalf of everyone, I would say congratulations.
Yay!
And we wish you a bright future. Hope you do very good.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming here.
And I'm sure he will do really, really good. Abi, come over. So Abhishek, you know, when you have an elder brother who is like really bright and smart and stuff, you are a younger kid. You gotta say, well, I gotta shine somehow. I gotta do something different. Well, guess what? What he did was, he says, I'm never afraid of heights. So as a little baby, he climbed over everything. You put something there, he climbed over that. So really, really good at that part. He goes to school, and while John was into, you know, running and cross country and stuff, this guy was into baseball. He played baseball, and then he played violin. And then he went on to play viola for his high school. And again, of course, you know, Jay is going to Troy High School. He says, I'm not going anywhere else. He's going to Troy High School. So he went there. And when he came out, the guy had a score in SAT that was like unimaginable for me. It was just few short of 2,400. And then when he gets an ACT test, he says, I can't do anything less than that. So he gets all 100%. So he was one of those kids that was called into. So he turned out to be one of those kids that was called into and Angels, right? In the Angels game, and he was honored in front of everybody. So that was great. Also, as part of his high school, he went out and said, okay, well, you know, I'm really interested in all these different kind of things and sciences. So he was a part of this science Olympiad. And there's one little kid right here who's also doing science Olympiad. Right, Susan? So guess what? So guess what? This kid and his team, they were best in the whole state of California, and the team won the championship. And they went on to national team, and they competed in national, and they stood second. So I would say that was really, really good. Good achievement. Awesome. Okay, and then after that, he says, you know, where should I go for schooling? So he's looking around in California, he's looking around outside of California, and he figured out that I really want to go to Ivy League. And he went on to Cornell, and studied at Cornell, and he did his finance major from Cornell.
Yay!
Now, Cornell is one of those universities that is a private university, and they have this own, you know, endowment that's millions of dollars. And guess what? These guys, these kids, they get to manage part of that endowment and manage that in terms of saying, okay, here's a portfolio, and we are going to create it and make sure it grows up. Now, one little fact that is not known is that the Wall Street is doing really good, and there are lots of funds that do really good. Turns out that these endowments have been doing even better than that. Guess what? That's because of bright kids like him. So I would say that was an awesome achievement. And, you know, just doing that wasn't really good, so he was part of his ski team and, you know, doing all sorts of stuff at school. Did you miss anything? Huh? Did you miss anything for you? No. All right. Yep, and, well, he was doing really good, so at the end of the story, he's done with his graduation, and before he's graduated, he gets a job in his hands. So he's ready for his job, and he's ready to go into Washington, D.C. and work as a finance consultant. There you go. Really good, and we are sure you'll do really, really well in your future. Thanks a lot.
Yay!
Yeah.
Jay Abi, come on, we need to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
Couple words.
So, I'll keep this short, but school, high school, I left California, left everything, went to New York, met new people, new friends, but 4 years later, I'm back in California. This is always my home, and everyone here is always my family, and since I was little, growing up, in college, it's still my family, you're always here, so thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm also not much for extemporaneous speaking, but I'll say that.
In Latin? we need at least a portion of your speech in Latin.
I need a few more drinks for anyway, but in general, like, life, I think, is more a journey of endurance than anything else. People say inspiration being a journey, but really, it's a long journey with a lot of struggles, and the thing that helps you go through each and every day that life presents you is your family and friends. And you always need an opportunity to go back home and recharge, whether it's calling your parents at the end of the day and saying, I've had a rough day, can I talk about it? Or just coming back for a family event, whether it's someone else's wedding or somebody else's party or just a get-together. Having time to recharge and step back from life and really enjoy what is really important, which isn't career, which isn't education, but just having yourself surrounded by people who are important to you and who love you and who you love in turn. So thank you all for being here, and I wouldn't miss it for the world.